Welcome everyone, I'm Spiro. Thanks for tuning in. Before we get started today, YouTube removed my latest report on mandatory vaccines being authorized in my state under the emergency declaration. The video is still available on BitChute, and I urge all of you to go and watch this report right after you watch this one. I'll leave a link in the description of this video. Now, today, I'm very happy to have a special guest who is a leading and critical expert on sustainable development, green economy, Agenda 21, the 2030 Agenda, and historic technocracy. He is the author of Technocracy, The Hard Road to World Order, and Technocracy Rising, the Trojan Horse of Global Transformation. He also co-authored the Trilaterals over Washington, Volumes 1 and 2, with the late Anthony C. Sutton. Patrick Wood is a leading expert on elitist trilateral commission, their policies and achievements in creating their self-proclaimed new international economic order, which is the essence of sustainable development on a global scale. Mr. Wood is an economist by education and a financial analyst and a writer by profession and an American constitutionalist by choice. He is also the editor-chief and founder of Technocracy.news. Patrick Wood, welcome and thank you for being my guest today.
Great, Spiro. Thanks for having me on. This is great. I've been looking forward to talking to you.
Likewise, and I can't wait to get right into this. And so right out of the gate, I just want to go right to the root of things. Like right now, what is your take on the big picture perspective? What is taking place right now, and what is the agenda?
Well, I've been writing about technocracy and speaking about it for a number of years now, as you know, and about globalization in general for decades. The thing that I talk about most is technocracy right now, because I believe that is and has been the major thread of history leading up to where we are today. And I do believe, starting with this great panic of 2020 that I call it, not just the pandemic, but the great panic of 2020, we have essentially a technocrat coup d'etat that's happened, not just in our country, it's the whole world. And the seriousness of this whole thing is just so immense that it's hard to get your head wrapped around it. And I'm sure some people are going to be watching this thinking, what are they talking about? How could this possibly be? But the whole world right now is laboring under the same issues that we are laboring in our country. That is the great panic of 2020. And aside from the physical virus part of it, we just kind of put that aside for a bit. The reaction to it and the control mechanisms that have been set in place since then indicates to me that the technocrats who were pushing technocracy globally have finally succeeded in springing the trap on the entire planet. And in the process, they've shut down the entire global economic system. And but we'll talk about that a little bit. This is so big, it is hard to get your head wrapped around it. And I sometimes assume that people know more than what they do, because I've been studying this for so long, looking at it for so long, it just seems natural to me. So I really want people to understand this and get a grasp of what's going on globally, because it does affect us. And I can assure you from emails I get from around the world, people in other countries are looking to America again to save the world. Oh, God help us. It's not going to be our government that does it. It's the American citizens like you and me. Somehow we have to come up with something that's going to throw a monkey wrench in this whole thing and reject technocracy again once and for all. It was rejected back in the last century in the 40s and late 30s and 40s. We need to reject it again and knock it back into the last century and leave it there permanently.
And once you really understand it blows my mind how it's all encompassing. Every aspect of our lives, they already have a plan for, and we're going to get into that more here in a little bit. But as you clearly stated, and I mentioned in your bio and with your books and everything, you are a leading expert on technocracy, no doubt about it. And I've been following your work for years. How would you best describe to someone who's not familiar with the term technocracy or technocrat, how would you best describe, like, what is a technocrat? Who is a technocrat?
Right. I always lead to answer that question with a statement from technocracy itself. This was a movement that started back in the 1930s originally. They defined themselves. I don't need to rehash their own definition because it's still true today as it was back then. They said back then, in 1938, for instance, in the magazine they published called The Technocrat. They said technocracy is the science of social engineering. That's the first big tell here. The science of social engineering. It's the scientific operation of the entire social mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population. That's the economic flavor of this whole thing. It was not a political system. They hated politicians. They wanted to do away with the entire political structure and simply manage the economy where people live. That's where people do stuff, right? And they wanted to do it using what they called the science of social engineering. And anywhere you see somebody practicing social engineering, you're touching the heart of a technocrat. And I spent a lot of time over the years that talked about it a lot, about the mind of a technocrat. And I've always wanted to get in their head, not to become one, but I want to know how they think. I want to know why they think what they think. I want to understand the subtleties of what they're likely to think about some other situation that might come up. And it's not too difficult to peg a lot of people as a technocrat. For instance, you look at an Anthony Fauci, for instance, pure example of somebody who's involved in the science of social engineering. It's not about the virus, it's about social engineering. He can fold his arms and look down his nose as he stands behind the president of our country, and he can look very condescending very quickly. And there's so many people like that, the scientists in white coats or engineers, whatever, and they're standing behind the scenes saying, we have the answer here. We have the only answer. You don't have anything, but you have to listen to us. And science says you should do X, Y, and Z. Therefore, you need to do X,